Welcome to the Herpcore History podcast, presented to you by Little Shop of Horrors. Feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media platforms for any of your feeder needs. All right, let's go ahead and get into this episode. All right, today I was lucky enough to be joined by Mr. Tom Crutchfield. And how are you doing today, Mr. Crutchfield?
I'm doing well. How are you, sir?
I'm doing excellent. So where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Marianna, Florida, which is in the panhandle of Florida, 90 miles west of Tallahassee in Jackson County. It's a very small town, southern town, So I grew up with a lot of wild country in Florida still left, and I did a lot of field collecting when I was real young. I grew up during the time of Jim Crow when there were white and colored, white drinking fountains and bathrooms and everything else, and always substandard for the poor blacks that lived in the county. So it made me sad always to see that. But I grew up during that time, and I caught a ringneck snake in my yard when I was 6 years old, and I thought it was one of the most beautiful snakes I'd ever seen. So I kept it in the jar for about 2 weeks and then released it. And there it started and just never stopped. I think I was born with a pre-existing condition to love and be interested in reptiles, for a life career.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And so, kind of getting into it, going out there, that those first kind of experiences and getting you into the hobby, and then was it something that besides the ringneck snake that you kept stuff before you started getting
No, I caught
into?
lots of stuff. Rat snakes. I caught an eastern diamondback rattlesnake when I was 12 years old.
Yeah, I'm sure your parents were happy about that.
No, they weren't real happy at all. They wanted to kill it, and so I ran back down where I caught it from and let it go again.
Yes, sir. And growing up, was it something that your parents were into, or were they not very
No,
supportive?
they weren't really into reptiles, but they allowed me to keep them. They wouldn't allow me to keep venomous snakes. They didn't allow me to keep any snakes inside, but they didn't want me keeping venomous snakes. And by the time I was 16, I had lots of them in the backyard.
Yeah. And so, kind of keeping outside was something that you were doing early on
Yeah, I had
by
alligators
having
too.
to.
I raised alligators up from the time I was 9 years old, from babies to like 7 or 8 feet by the time I was 18, and I gave them to Ross Allen when I left home.
Excellent. And so, one of the earlier kind of getting into it, and as you grew up and you get into the point where you decide to go get a job, what was it? The Snakeatarium was one of your earlier jobs.
Snakatorium.
Snakeatorium. What was how'd you get in there? What was that like?
Well, I knew Denny Seabold. I'd been selling him snakes I caught for years. So I just got a job as a summer guide, basically going in with big alligators and sort of not really wrestling them, but explaining what an alligator was and how they operated and the double eyelids and the whole 9 yards. And uh, then I'd milk, they'd have a venomous show every time you did it. The whole thing you go through was harmless and then venomous. Harmless and big lizards. They had a thing there with big rhino iguanas and rycord iguanas and stuff like that.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And what were some of going into a situation like that where obviously you were connected with these people and you were keeping your own animals, but kind of getting into, more, not more professional, however it was, but those settings, what was kind of the change in your mind, or did you learn anything when that was going on?
I'm not sure what the question is.
I guess so. Like, for me, there was a shift in my keeping from going from, a private keeper to working at a pet shop and the education that comes with that, whether it's front facing with patrons coming in or the professionals around you and how they're doing it. Did any of that kind of change up the way that you thought about keeping or what you were doing at that point?
Well, what changed me is sort of like taught me the whole time I was keeping stuff were the animals themselves. I would watch the animals and learn what they need and how they act, and I was an expert in understanding their molting at a very young age.
Yes,
So,
sir. Excellent. And then, so moving on after that, what were kind of the next steps you took in the hobby and kind of moving forward? Because this is something you've been in. I grew up hearing your name, and so you've been in this for forever.
I have a lifetime. A lifetime. Once I left, once the '70s came about, instead of going out west like a lot of my peers did and hunting gray banded king snakes and mottle rock rattlesnakes and the like, I went to the Caribbean and traveled to various islands, the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, Jamaica, Dominican Republic, Haiti, a lot of trips to Haiti, collecting stuff and bringing it back. There was no CITES then, so you could go and catch whatever you wanted and just bring it back in suitcases, including rhinoceros iguanas.
Very cool. And so, kind of early on, I think that's kind of a good point that you brought up. There was that shift where a lot of people in the '70s had interest in gray bands and going out west and
Hmm.
collecting it. What were some of those? Did you see many of those early gray bands coming over from Texas to Florida and kind of
Yeah,
seeing
yeah,
that?
yeah. I bought and sold lots of gray banded king snakes over the years. I've had many, many thousands of them.
Yeah. And what was that? What was that like? Back then, kind of that
Well, they
rush to
were
see those.
exciting, but I couldn't compare a gray banded king snake to a rhinoceros iguana.
Yeah, yeah. It's so interesting, right? As someone like myself, where I'm an alternative nerd, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's that's the best thing to me, right? And so, to hear it where it's super interesting to go, oh, you know what? Instead of going that way, I started going down to Haiti and stuff like that. And
I
so,
did.
what was that like? Setting up those first trips.
Well,
What?
I didn't know what to do exactly or where to get the animals from, and we wound up buying a lot of them from the indigenous people that were there.
Gotcha. And is that like you just take a shot in the dark where we go, well,
Well,
this
you
is
just
where we
go up
want to get to?
someplace and start asking for a laculive. You have to speak in Creole because they don't understand English at all.
Yeah.
And I brought an interpreter with me, and I learned to speak a little Creole myself.
Excellent. And so your first kind of trips down there, what was that like, and what were the
Well, it
people
was by
like? And
the it was by my pants sleeves, really, or arm sleeves. I didn't really know where I was going. I had researched it, but I didn't know much about it. I had never certainly been there before.
yes, sir, yeah. Well, that's so interesting. And so kind of bringing some of those first animals in was what I'm trying to think here. What was um, what was that like? Getting those, like, were you
Well, it
aware?
was
I
very
assume you were
cool
aware of
because
them.
I mean, it was very cool because I collected a lot of them myself,
Yes, yeah,
and the others I got in the country of origin. So
yes, sir.
I learned a lot about how they live. I learned a lot about them in nature. It was a constant learning process, and to be perfectly honest with you, it still is.
Yes, sir.
A master forever remains the student.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's true. And especially, early on getting to go out there and not only collect animals yourself, but to have the foresight to really pay attention to the habitat that you were seeing them in.
Well, yeah,
Um,
that was what I wanted to go there for, was to learn as much about them as I could. And the wild is what you learn about to learn how to keep them in captivity.
yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's so backwards, now in the hobby where people, it doesn't really happen or it's not possible, right? Just the world is so connected and where animals are coming from, it's hard to do that. But I know that was definitely a game changing moment for me getting out west and getting to see how these animals live
Yeah,
and my keeping and how that changed.
it was cool, but it wasn't as cool as the Atimaniti in Haiti
Yeah.
with
And
rhino
so,
iguanas running all over.
yes, sir. And with that, was some of these animals bringing in, was that something where, you get to see those animals and get to do those travels and see all that stuff? That's really interesting being early on there and getting to see those different animals in those areas. And I imagine that, going on in some of those early books that were there, were you aware of these animals from books that you had
Oh,
seen?
yeah, I
Or
already knew what I was going after.
yes, sir,
I
yeah.
just didn't know how to find them.
Yeah. That's always the challenge there. Well, excellent. And so you know, bringing one of the things of my understanding is like working at was it Herpetofauna,
Yeah.
and what was that like? And
Well,
was that kind of in
that
line
business was
with?
Herpetofauna Incorporated. Was the first
Okay,
incorporated
okay,
business I had, if that's what you're asking.
yes sir, yes sir.
Right, and that was about 1980 or 81.
Okay, so you'd already at that point you'd been making your trips, collecting your
All
animals,
over the
and was
Caribbean
that
and bringing them back for myself. Like with rhino iguanas, I brought back 2 shipments of 24 and quite a few shipments with a few here and a few there. And those grew up to be a lot of the breeders that still existed here in the country until, a few years back because, they live a very long time. And so now rhino iguanas are one of the most commonly bred cyclura out there. They really are. So, what can I say? Conservation through commercialization.
yes
No
sir,
one would ever smuggle rhino iguanas anymore.
yeah. And were you one of the first people to really bring those
I
into North
was.
American herpetoculture?
Hmm.
Excellent.
Well, one
And
of the
what?
first. There was others.
Gotcha. Okay, excellent. And so, kind of being bringing those in and seeing, was there a real want for those in the hobby, or was that something that you
Well,
cultivated
when you
over
say
time?
hobby, how the hell did we communicate back then? There was no internet. You had
Yeah.
to put
No,
a
right. It was
price list out every month, and your only conversations back and forth were with customers that called in to purchase something.
yes, sir. Yeah, and I think a lot of us in kind of the history we get to see, like in the old school herpers group, it's awesome getting to see those old price lists.
Hmm.
But we all see it from the outside, sending the letter to the person going, "Hey, can you send me a price list or a picture of this or that?" What was that like being the guy on the other side of that, getting because again, to your point, the hobby was so insular at that point, and then when you open yourself up, and now I imagine you're getting letters from all over.
I am, and
What was that
phone
like?
calls, lots of phone calls.
Yeah. What was that like for you? Or
That's
getting to hear
just it
just
was my business was being very successful, so I was happy with it.
yes, sir, yeah. And I assume the passion that
Well, yeah,
you can get
I got
recharged
to see
up.
more new stuff than zoos did. We got in way
Yeah.
more stuff at my shop than zoos ever did. I mean, zoos got a lot of their stock from me.
Yes, sir.
They
Yeah.
were major customers of mine, the major AZA zoos, from the Bronx Zoo to the San Diego Zoo, Zoo Miami, you name it.
Yes, sir. And so, with those connections that you were making with some of those animals that you were bringing in, what were you? Was it for the most part you always going afield and making personal collection
I
connections
did,
with those
and
expert?
buying animals all over the world. Once the 70s ended, in the 1980s, I started traveling to Southeast Asia and around the world, doing the same thing as I did with the Caribbean, except that there was some laws in effect now, so we had to get CITES on some stuff and all that. But that was all right. The dealers in Thailand and Jakarta could do that, and then I'd go visit the dealers, buy it, pick out a shipment, and pay for it, and buy it, and have it exported back to me. Before I ever got back home, my longest trip around the world was 6 weeks. I took. I was
Wow.
gone 6 weeks,
Yeah.
but I went a
And
multitude of
I'm
places. I went to Sri Lanka for a week, the Seychelles for a week, Thailand for a week, Indonesia for a week, Hong Kong for a few days, and so it goes. And all that time I was buying stuff. Like I sent back 24 Aldabra tortoises from the Seychelles, and the very first Phelsuma sunburgi to ever be imported, and Phelsuma abadi.
yeah. That's so interesting to get to be on the cutting edge of that, and that's something that you know younger people in the hobby will never get to experience, right?
Well,
Being
no,
the
they
first to
could, but
bring.
they're not going to do it because they don't have the money to financially support it, or they don't have the inclination, the adventuresome spirit to go do it. Because
Yes, sir.
remember, I'm
Yeah.
not going to 5-star hotels and stuff. I'm going out in the country.
Yeah.
Everywhere I am, I'm in the jungle or the woods or somewhere.
Yes. Yeah. Using a hole for a toilet there.
Yep.
And so kind of what are some of the more memorable stories from those early adventures that I mean, I can only imagine, right? What was
I
that
mean, I caught a
like?
wild king cobra in northern Thailand near Chiang Mai or Chiang Rai. Uh, Lots of stuff like that. I mean, God, let me think of a particular story. I mean, we went hunting by elephant back in Thailand and all kinds of stuff. Collecting reptiles in Malaysia too.
Yeah.
Malaysia, we went out in small boats and caught reticulate pythons between 1 and 2 meters and mangrove snakes, in a palm swamp,
And what was the
basking overhead. So it was a lot of fun.
yeah? So the method on that was just ripping
Reach
down
up and
the
grab them.
yeah. I'm sure they were happy
No,
to
they
be
weren't
snatched
overly
up like
happy.
that. What the hell is this?
Yep.
Oh, that's interesting. And so, kind of, early on there, and bringing these animals in, what were some of the earliest mutations that you saw, and what was that like
Well,
seeing
I got all
those?
kinds of mutations over the years. I brought in an albino water monitor from Thailand back in the 80s, early 80s, and sold it. An adult, a big adult that was at an animal dealer's, and I purchased it from him. And I I saw a solid blue green tree python one time in Thailand, but I couldn't get permits for it, and he wouldn't sell it to me. I offered him $5,000 for it, but it was the bluest one I've ever seen to this day, with a white stomach.
Wow. Yeah, that's so cool, right? And so then early, I mean, I assume these people, these exporters, they knew what they had,
No,
and they
they
knew.
did. They charged accordingly.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
I brought the first, what do they call it, calico retic. I brought the very first calico retic in also, probably about 1984. And probably my greatest achievement on morphs in terms of getting anything is I brought in the first albino Burmese pythons.
Yeah. Well, that's so interesting, right? To Because you think about that and how that
Well, that
shifted
was a very
the
big
hop.
deal.
Yes. Yeah. Well, what was that when you saw that animal?
Well,
I mean, what went through your
there were
head?
three of them,
Okay.
and I had to purchase them.
Gotcha. And did you purchase all
I
three, or
did.
did
They
you
cost me
purchase?
$7,000 a piece.
Wow. Yeah, that's such an interesting thing because they are so, so many people you talk to them about snakes and what do they remember? They remember the big yellow snake,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so how many people that has brought into the hobby through education, the just the eye poppingness of them, a real shift in herpetoculture there,
yep,
and still popular today.
yes,
It's kind of, this is a topic that's come up before that's pretty interesting where, if you look at reptiles like art, right? You could have a statue, and you take care of the statue, and that's cool, or the painting, but once the painting's done, it's done, right? And you can admire it in your house, and nothing really else needs to be done to it. But when you look at reptiles as living art, and that people are going to continue to propagate that animal that has a lifespan and keep it moving forward, what an interesting mark to make on society where that thing that you saw, other people see in it too and care enough to keep it, give up space for it, take care of it, and then ultimately propagate it. It's pretty cool.
yeah. It's very cool. Very,
Especially
very
to see
cool. It
them.
seems like just yesterday.
Yeah, yeah. Especially to see how, I mean, and they're all over the world now.
Oh, I
That
know.
one
I know.
decision to say, "Hey, bring this in," and how that, again, how it changed herpetoculture moving forward.
It did. Even in Thailand, it did. People started to keep pythons and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, even one of my early mentors, I remember him telling me about, oh man, I got, early on, I got berms, and I got an albino berm, and that was one of the many turning points he had where, hey, that shaped him, and if it wasn't for him getting into that, it wouldn't have allowed me to get into where I'm at now, and what
Yeah.
I'm into. So, super interesting. Thanks for making that decision.
No worries. I enjoyed making it.
Very cool, very cool. And that's also interesting too to hear about the calico reticulated pythons,
Hmm.
how early those were brought in, because that's something that
I bred them
I feel
one
like it
year. I
wasn't.
actually brought them in and bred them. That's what I
Oh,
intended to
really?
do. And all the babies hatched out normal, which they do. They change as they get older into
Uh,
calico. And I didn't know that. And so I sold them all as regular retics. And then
mm,
I sold the big calico because I didn't think it was genetic.
gotcha. Yeah, that's so interesting,
The
right?
zoo in Montreal bought that, the Quebec Zoo.
Oh, okay.
I
Okay.
exported to zoos too, all over the world, from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, you name it.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, too, it's stuff like that, right? We take for granted that information, but early on, why would you think these animals were going to change over time? That.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't.
Mm.
And it's so interesting to kind of think about that. Excellent. Very cool. And so, early on, and kind of, I know that you worked with someone that I'd spoken to already, who he was nice enough to join me and also put us in contact. Randall Berry. What was that? What was that like? What was his time frame with
Well,
you?
Randall always worked at zoos, and I needed a manager, and so I hired him, and he did a good job.
Yes, sir. Yeah. There seems to be a lot of kind of overlap. It's very interesting listening to some of these early on guys that went from the zoo field to private keeping
Yeah,
and
a
and
lot of
and
my
did
friends
that.
did.
Yes, sir. Yeah. It seems like nowadays there's a little bit more of like a separation, but it hasn't always been that way, nor should it be
No, it
that way,
used to
right?
be
And there's
mixed
stuff we
up.
can learn from.
At the IHS, there used to be private people there giving papers, zoo people, academics, and now it's kind of changed. It hasn't changed that much, but it's still changed a lot compared to
Yeah.
what it used to be in terms of the intermingling of academia, zoo people, and the private sector herpetoculturists.
Yes, sir. And that's kind of an interesting topic to talk about because some of those these earlier keepers you get to talk to hey, like, they're like, here's a paper that I worked on, here's the studies that I did to kind of prove these things, and you don't see that as much in herpetoculture
No.
now. And I think part of that's because whether it's good or bad information, so much information now is readily available online.
Hmm.
But what are the shifts that you see from early herpetoculture to what you see now?
Well, people are going towards more like the European thing now and setting up naturalistic vivariums, for their animals
Oh,
instead of keeping them on newspaper in just a sterile cage.
yes, sir.
So it's better for the animals.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and
All
that,
reptiles are sentient beings and deserve better than what they get.
yeah, yeah, it does seem to be there. There's a line down the middle there, and kind of how people think
Yeah,
about
I
that
mean, I have
stuff.
second
And
thoughts about bringing in albino Burmese pythons and reticulate pythons and all that stuff because of the way that they're kept. They're kept in substandard, way too small cages 90% of the time.
yeah,
And the animals know
yeah,
that.
yeah, that's an unfortunate reality.
It is, and it's one that we need to change and that we can change.
Yeah, yeah, and through education, right, reaching out
Right.
to people and let them know it's difficult, right, because that's something that I run into
Well,
where
people get mad
sometimes
at
you're
you for speaking out against something that they believe in or that they want to suggest is good in their mind. And I had all of the retic people attack me at one point about 12 to 15 years ago because they even want me to go on a post similar to this, but where you were on camera. So I did, and he goes, well, why do you constantly attack? Like I have memes, friends don't let friends keep giant snakes in vision cages or boxes, slide-in boxes, and stuff
uh,
like that. And they got really upset. So I went on there and I said, I'll tell you what, guys. I said, I won't say anything else about y'all at all if you can answer one question for me. I just want one question answered. How do small cages benefit giant snakes in a positive way? I said, just explain that to me, and I'll do it. But I said, basically, you keep them in small cages because it ensures your profit because you can keep more animals. And even though you can keep them healthy, they may not be happy, but you don't care. And basically, for those of you who took offense, it's because you understand what you're doing is not right, but you don't want to do anything to change it, to just cut down the numbers and keep smaller animals in bigger cages.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I could definitely see how people would push back against that
But they
and
did. But I
be upset.
honestly, I'm of a mindset. I don't care. I want to do what's right for the animals. You know what I mean? And if you want to debate me on it, I'm happy to do it with anybody. But you're not going to win.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean, right,
there's no good
whether
reason for keeping them in tiny, small cages,
no.
except
No,
for your
yeah.
own profit.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's something that, as we're moving forward in the hobby, and I think we are seeing that, right? Where
Hmm.
most of the people that I run into that, hey, I just got my first snake, and they show me a picture of their cage, and it's an extravagant cage where, early on, that's not what I was thinking about, at all, and that's their first go to. So that's it is an interesting shift to see, and I think it is better for the mental health of reptiles moving forward.
Yep.
Excellent. And so, kind of early on, who were because I think that's something that you're known for definitely is keeping animals outside in large enclosures. Was that? I mean, obviously you started doing that when you were
I
younger.
started doing
You
that
had to.
in the 1950s and 60s.
Yes, sir.
Keeping animals
And,
outside Mariana, Florida. I had alligators, like I told you, all kinds of snakes.
yes, sir. And so that was just kind of that's just the way you've been doing it, and so it kind of translated
Right.
into what you did
And then
moving
I
forward.
pioneered building, good cages that were escape proof, but by the same token, the animals had plenty of room. So my smallest
Yes, sir.
cages outside were 6 by 6 foot by 8 feet tall, but they were for like tree monitors and stuff.
Hmm.
The big crocodile monitor habitats were 12 by 16 by 8 feet tall.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and I think that's it's impressive to see cages like that. Something that I'm lucky enough to get to go and see a couple times is Reptilandia
Yeah.
out here in Johnson City,
Hmm.
Texas.
Yeah, he's a good friend of
Yeah,
mine, Kessel is. I just shipped him a big gaboon viper.
yes, sir. Yeah, and I mean, those enclosures. I don't know if you've been out here. You've got
I
to see
haven't, but I've
pictures
seen a
of
lot of
them.
photographs of them.
Yeah, it's. I mean, they're amazing.
Mhm.
It's like nothing I've ever seen before. Where you're going in there and it's a two-story cage,
Yep.
and and it's like, wow, that's you know now, right, it's not feasible for the average person to keep an animal like that,
Nope.
but man, when you can see it, and it's very impressive and makes you
Well, it
think,
makes
okay,
such
I
a
can
big
do
difference in
better.
how the animals act too.
Yes, sir. Yeah, you could see more naturalistic behavior, and then also to again, to your point about keeping stuff in small cages, I think that you don't get to see those animals aren't going to get to work their muscles
Well, they're
like
not
they
going to
should.
be. You need to keep them so that they can be the animals that they really are. And
Yes,
if you
sir.
can't do
Yeah, yeah.
that, then perhaps you should choose a different reptile.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Don't yeah, don't go above your means on kind of
Crocodilians
what.
are another thing that don't make good pets and that people really shouldn't keep. They
Yeah.
bond with their keeper and get really emotionally involved with the keeper, and then on top of it, they grow so fast, so quick. How can you provide for even an adult, smallest of all crocodilians get 4 or 5 feet long? How can you keep that?
Yeah. Yeah, you'd have to dedicate your backyard to that.
Yeah, or a whole basement in your house.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, no, very very interesting there. And so what were kind of who were your early mentors getting into the
Boy,
hobby
Ross
and
Allen, Denny Seabold at Snakatorium. Lots of good friends were in the zoo world then, so I became friends with him, and then we sort of were mentors to each other. We would talk and explain what we've seen and learned and all that kind of stuff. So it was a learning process from everybody all the way around.
Yes, sir. And those early mentors, what what was that like? You know, hanging out with those guys.
Well, it was just that they knew a lot more than I did, and they'd been around a lot longer than I had. So I tried to listen to what they were saying. And certainly, Denny taught me how to handle these diamondback rattlesnakes, and I'm probably as good as anybody on the planet handling those even today because of
Yes,
all
sir.
that early training. With Ross Allen and Denny.
Yes, sir.
Mostly with Denny, he was the best.
And kind of, do you remember what got those guys into the hobby?
Well,
And kind of,
Denny was a logger in Central America, with people shooting at him sometimes from the shore with arrows and darts and stuff like that. It was not the same world then in the 40s, as it is today, in 50s. And when they retired from the logging, this friend of his had this little place in Panama City, called Snakatorium, and Denny bought it, and the rest is history.
interesting. Yeah, it's funny. I remember growing. So my mother's side of the family grew up in Panama City,
Hmm.
Florida, and I remember my aunt telling me stories about going to the Snakeatorium,
Hmm.
and I think she said she had a boyfriend that they would drive around and he would pick up snakes and he would take them there.
Yeah, so.
And but again, you know, right? It's an outside person that doesn't have an interest in reptiles, you
Right.
know, but how that affected her moving forward, you know.
Hmm.
Very cool, very cool. I wonder if that'd be interesting if you guys had ran into each other at some point there. Kind of interesting, right? Small world
Yeah.
kind of situation. So man, being a logger back in the day like that, and then so do you know why he made the shift to get into reptiles? Was it
No,
something
he'd
that he
always been
appreciated
kind of into
before?
reptiles a little bit, but mostly from a showman standpoint. Then he didn't like to keep reptiles per se, except for an exhibit.
Gotcha. Okay.
He
So it
wasn't
was
he
kind of
wasn't
a
passionate about it like I am in terms of keeping stuff.
gotcha. Okay. And then the other gentleman you said was Ross
Ross
Allen?
Allen, yeah, he's very well known.
Okay. Yes, sir. Yeah. And what was he like as a person?
A real nice guy. I talked to him about 2 weeks before he died. He was in the hospital with prostate cancer. He
Gotcha.
died at 74.
What a bummer.
Yep.
Yeah, right. You know, that's the unfortunate part about this, right? But you know, nothing lasts forever.
No.
That's a bummer. And that's you know, that's the whole idea behind this project, right? Is just to capture as many voices as possible and get to speak to people and kind of do the best that I can do to save as much history as possible because you know, you see it all the time with people passing away that once, you know, besides the people that they mentored and the knowledge they got to share, which is very valuable, but you know, it's gone. And just the little stories that are little passovers, you know, that it's not a big deal to them, but it's a crazy story, you know.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. And so getting back to kind of some of those early adventures and what when did it go wrong? Was there ever where you're on a boat and you know it just didn't go as
Well,
planned or
yeah,
anything like that?
we were on a flight from northern Thailand down to Bangkok from Chiang Mai, and the lightning hit the plane over the southern Himalayas, and I remember lights went out of the plane plummeted, and they got power real quick, and we made almost a 45-degree upwards angle, to avoid the mountains because we were in the mountains. And I thought we were going to die for sure, but nothing happened. Penny was with me, my ex-wife. That was probably the
That's
most hair
great.
raising. We just thought literally we were dead.
Yeah. Yeah, right. You would too,
Yeah,
right? Holy crap. You know, a little bit of turbulence is scary enough, but that,
yeah, that wasn't
you know,
turbulence. That was something different. We
yeah.
had people taken
Yeah.
to the hospital when we got back to Bangkok that had broke their legs from hitting the ceiling and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, wow. Wow.
We were both
Eh,
then, thank goodness.
yeah. Wow. That yeah. And then, and then just okay, well that sucked and we're going to keep on this adventure to the next one.
Yep, yep. That was Thai International.
Wow. That's crazy. Well, then too. So, what were some of the characters that you met? You know, these animal vendors that were in
Well,
these
God,
different
there were wet
areas.
markets all over the world. I mean, there still are.
Yes,
And
sir.
all you need to do is get slapped in the face by a wet market, when you're in your early 30s, and it changes you.
Yeah. Well, what was it? I mean, what was it like, right?
Well,
I've
it was
seen
just
them in
it was
videos.
disgusting to watch animals being tortured and killed and held. I mean, having monitor lizards with their big toe cut off, the tip of it cut off, and their tendons pulled out, and their arms tied over their backs, and their tails
Mm,
bundled up and tied beside them, and they used the tail as the way to carry the monitor. By its feet, hung by tendons, tied by tendons. And when you start to see
wow,
abject cruelty like that and other stuff that were equally as bad, I just had a bad taste in my mouth.
for sure. And so, kind of being in the cutting edge there, was a lot of the animals that you were able to find, was it from wet
Yeah,
market
almost all
sources?
of them.
Okay. So there really wasn't, now you hear about,
Well, no,
right, the
they have
reptile
dealers. They
farms that,
have dealers there too.
okay.
But the wet markets had stuff also that dealers might not have. So I went to the wet markets as well as the dealers.
Gotcha. Okay. So there was
There
already
was already
some
established
sort of
commerce. Yes.
infrastructure. Okay. Okay, I gotcha. Interesting. And what were those characters like? The exporters that you ran into, were
They were
they
nice. They were a different lot. I mean, a lot of them had been to real primitive places and collecting stuff themselves and buying from. They bought from natives too everywhere. So just like I was doing it all.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Do were there any stories that stand out from some of those
I remember one
early
guy
kind
at
of
a wet
export?
market when had a lot of monitor lizards in it. He took about a 5 foot monitor out of a cage and he was holding it by the tail, and this thing's mouth was open and it was pissed off, and he was wearing rubber boots but didn't go up to his calf. Went about halfway to his calf, and that monitor swung its body around and hit his leg, biting, and his entire gastrocnemius, which is what your calf muscle is called, uh, sort of popped out of his leg.
Oh,
He had to go to the hospital and get that all sutured up.
jeez, that's crazy.
Yeah, he got hurt pretty bad.
Yeah, yeah. You're like, hey, can I get a deal on that one? You obviously don't want that one around.
Yeah, well, that was not friendly.
Well, that's so interesting. And so, get man, that's just so interesting, right? To have those adventures and to travel around and be bringing those animals
Yep, I've
in.
been to every continent but Antarctica.
Yeah. Well, there's no reptiles there, so
No, I
there's no
won't be
point to
going
go
there.
there. Well, what's one of your favorite places that you've been that kind of holds a love in your heart?
I probably like Thailand the best. I liked Australia. I liked it all. I liked the difference in cultures, the difference learning how people live, and it just everybody wants. I found out over the world over, we're not so different. We all want the same thing.
Yeah.
For our families, security and to live comfortable and doing what we want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun how, and it's interesting how reptiles, right? That common thread there can get you in the door with people that you might not get to speak to or interact with, and
Right.
then yeah, we're not all that different.
Well, you're not.
It's
I mean, the cultures are just different, but I mean, we're not different in our what we really want or what we're trying to achieve.
yeah, yeah, it's all still basic, right? It's
Yeah.
just basic animal stuff, right? We all want the same thing that a deer wants or
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
else. We can verbalize it, and so we
Correct.
think we're different. It's pretty interesting. Well, that's so cool. And so, I'm trying to think maybe is there anything that I should be asking you that I'm not asking you that I'm dropping the ball on here?
Let me think. Just the real primitive part of it. Early on, it was really a lot more primitive going to those places because they weren't. Bangkok was nothing like it is today, and in Haiti, you went back in time. I mean, you were living in the Stone Age, basically. People did not
Yeah.
have electricity. They lived in mud huts and had to go carry water. I mean, it was, you may as well have been in some tribe in some remote part of Africa. It was basically almost the same.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah. Can only imagine, right? How
Yeah.
cool that'd have been to kind of get to experience that. you know,
Yeah, that was
and
a cool. That was really a cool factor, the primitiveness of the trips.
yeah, and to see how people still live. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? You get so comfortable with your right,
yeah.
you're this or you're that, and then to go, well, you know, there's people that are living just fine and they don't have that. You know, very, very interesting. Well, good. And so I'm trying to, think what else here, right? And so kind of running your own facility and seeing the characters that came through
Oh yeah,
there.
that was the most. That was the funniest part. We had some crazy people in and out of the shop
Yeah.
all the time.
Well, any stories that stick out to you of
Well, I
that?
remember a friend of mine I knew real well had tigers, and he came walking in the shop with a big tiger on a leash one time, and I immediately threw him out and made him take the cat outside, put it back
Yeah.
in the truck.
Yeah.
Stuff like
Yeah.
that. People bring venomous snakes in. One woman brought a rattlesnake in her shirt, inside of her shirt.
What? Like she didn't know what it was, or she knew it was a
Yeah.
rattlesnake, or
Also, too, we used to get. Stacy just reminded me. I used to get all of these weird carny people come and buy stuff from me too for their shows.
uh
Usually big pythons or something like that. And we had these people coming. Oh, uh, his name was the Lobster Boy. I'm trying to think of his name, but his hands were pincher hands and his feet were big pinchers. And he could jump on the floor and pop his like hands and jump around all over the floor. He looked weird beyond belief. And he had a snake show at the carnival. And he'd come in and buy big pythons. And then we had these little people that were like literally like under 4 feet tall. They were tiny, but they were perfectly proportioned. You have the wolf guy. And I'd come in and start when they come in, I'd start humming "Follow the Yellow Brick Road," and they'd start to dance. They'd start to dance and sing the song and march into the shop to follow the little Yellow Brick Road. It was funny shit.
That's so interesting. Yeah, Crab Boy, that's crazy. Of course, that guy was into reptiles, right?
Yeah, of course he was. His idea of a big python was 8 feet long because he was so small.
Yeah, made picking out snakes
They
easy.
had
Everything's big.
specially built trucks to drive in and all kinds of stuff.
Wow,
But they were good people.
that's
They just were different.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
got
Just
to
trying
meet
to
a lot
make
of
their way.
carnies on the way too. Some were good, some were not.
Yeah, interesting, interesting. Well, that's so cool, man. And all right, well, cool, well, excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I
You're welcome.
appreciate it, and I hope that I did it justice. I feel like every time I go back and I edit these, I go, man, I should have asked this and I should have asked that. And so, if in the future we ever think of stuff and we want to run it back and do it again, and and I appreciate your time today very
You're
much.
welcome.
Thank you.
Take care.
Let me zoom out on you here. Okay, you got a message for the time capsule?
Yeah, and it's simply this. My prediction for you is that even though you'll forget all about this in some way consciously, next summer at about this time, you'll remember to return.